Hey y'all, welcome to today's video. Today is Monday, November 5th, and just tomorrow is election day, and today in this video I'm gonna make an updated prediction of the Senate races. And for your information, this will be the last time I make a video about 2018, and after this I'll be focusing solely on the 2020 races, the presidential race and also the Senate race, and maybe the House race and the governor race, but I'll need some time to think about that. But yet after this video, I'll be focusing on the presidential race and the 2020 Senate races. Now let's get to our business. So I've been absent for a long while, and during my absence, a lot of things transpired, a lot of changes occurred, and the momentum of the race has changed. And in my personal opinion, I think it's tipped more toward the Republican Party's favor, because after the Kavanaugh hearing, which, by the way, enraged a lot of conservatives, the Republican base has been literally galvanized, and you know now the Republicans' interest and enthusiasm in the midterm elections is as high as Democrats, and I think this is really almost unprecedented for a year like this, a year where a Republican president is in the White House and the Congress, both houses, are under Republican control, and this has been historically weird, um, and so after the Kavanaugh hearing, we've seen a lot of GOP surges in key states like Tennessee, Texas, Nevada, Arizona, North Dakota, and more. And now just a lot of polls and early voting turnouts, recent turnouts, have shown that the GOP has a strong ground in these states. So I think there's a good chance that the GOP would not only retain its 51 seats majority in the Senate, but also expand its control over this upper chamber. And so now we're gonna see how many seats the Republican Party can capture. So let's Let's get started. So first of all, we're gonna fill states that are going to be uncompetitive. Those states that are going to be in a safe column. 13 Democratic seats and 5 Republican seats. Now, the entire Midwest, excluding the state of Indiana, I think is going to be in the likely column, and they're going to vote for their Democratic senators because these Democratic senators are popular in their respective home state, and poll numbers show that these Democrats are leading their Republican opponents by considerable margins. And in Michigan, I see a lot of people saying that Republican nominee John James could upset Debbie Stabenow, but I think the polls just a week ago the polls tightened, but now the polls have widened again. So I think John James may be able to make the race close, but at the end of the day, I think Senator Stabenow would be able to retain her seat. So I'm gonna fill these states, and Virginia and New Mexico are also going to be in a likely column for the Democrats because these states have popular Democratic incumbents, and these two states are uh, liberal leaning since you know they've been this way since like 2008. So yeah, now the Democratic Party has 43 seats and the Republican Party has 47. So now, uh, all the states left here are considered toss-up. So first of all, let's start with Texas. So Texas, I think, is going to be in the Republican column because Texas is still has a conservative character, and Ted Cruz, the incumbent Republican senator who's vying for re-election, is still popular in here. His approval rating is still positive, and yeah, it's still quite high. And you know, although his opponent, Democratic Representative Beto O'Rourke, is doing really well in poll, and it is it is unprecedented also because Texas has been a deep red state, and this year the polls are extremely close. Beto O'Rourke just trails Ted Cruz by just uh, single digit. In recent poll, Ted Cruz led O'Rourke by just 3 points, and that is absolutely concerning for the Republican Party, as a Democratic Party could make an inroad to their conservative base in the state. But actually, I think Ted Cruz could lose, but I don't think that the Democratic campaign would be able to muster out enough voters to get, push their candidate to victory. So, as of right now, I would give the state Texas to the Republican Party. And now let's get on to the state of Tennessee. Tennessee, I think this one is also a weird race because this race is extremely close. And the interesting thing is that Tennessee has always been a state of conservatives. It's been a red state for decades, and this year the Senate race here uh, is rated as toss-up because the state's former governor Phil Bredesen is the Democratic nominee and is a huge favorite among Tennesseans. But you know, just back in September, he actually led the Republican candidate Representative Marsha Blackburn in polls. But now, um, just weeks later, the Republican Party surged dramatically in the state, and Marsha Blackburn is now leading Burdenston by 9 points, if I recall it correctly. Yes, and also early voting turnouts favored the Republican Party in Tennessee and also in Texas. So, in my opinion, I think Tennessee would go to the Republican column. Now, the state of West Virginia, I think, is going to the Democratic Party because Joe Manchin is uh, still popular in his home state, and I really don't see the real effort by the Republican Party to capture this seat, because Manchin is a conservative Democrat, and he actually aligns himself with the state, uh, with the state's ideology, but on several issues, and that's why he's still popular in this state. And Manchin is doing well in the polls, and he's leading his GOP opponent Patrick Morrisey by um, significant margins. So I think West Virginia could remain Democrat, and Montana I think would remain Democrat. Well, actually, I'm not going to touch Montana just yet. And now let's see Nevada. I think Nevada is going to be a Republican state this cycle because Dean Heller is the incumbent senator, and he's a Republican running for re-election. And as he's an incumbent, he has an advantage over his opponent. And the early voting turnout that was released shows that the Democratic Party has edged the Republican Party by, um, if I recall it, I don't know, but yeah, the Democratic Party has stronger early voting turnout in the state of Nevada, but poll numbers show that Dean Heller is leading Jackie Rosen, the Democratic nominee, and just um, in my last video, I predict that Nevada would go Democrat, but now just after the Kavanaugh hearing, the Republican Party has surged in the state of Nevada, and Dean Heller once led Jackie Rosen by 7 points in the poll. So I think that has shown that GOP has come back in this state, and I think eventually, when polls close, Dean Heller would appear as a victor. So, another seat for the Republican Party, yeah, and this gives the Republican Party 50 seats. Now let's look at the state of Arizona. Arizona, this is an open seat, and it's vacated by retiring Senator Jeff Flake, and I think it's it's a close race also, and this is unusual as Arizona is like North Carolina, like maybe just like Texas and Tennessee. Arizona is a right leaning state, and this year the Democratic Party is doing really well in the polls, but you know just recently the Republican Party has come back to lead the Democratic Party in the state of Arizona, and poll numbers have shown that the Republican Party has an advantage here, and early voting turnout also suggests the same. So I would call this seat for the Republican Party, whose nominee is Representative Martha McSally, and I think McSally could beat her Democratic opponent Christine Sinema, uh, because just recently there were a lot of attacks on Sinema, with regard to her previous remarks, and some kind of things like that, and that's why I think the Republican Party could win the state of Arizona. And now let's get to the state of North Dakota. North Dakota is another state that the GOP is going to win. Incumbent Democratic candidate Heidi Heitkamp, incumbent Democratic Senator Heidi Heitkamp is really unpopular in her home state, and this is partially because she voted against the Kavanaugh confirmation, and while the vast majority of North Dakotans support the confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court, and Heitkamp just opposed that, so I think her opposition to the Kavanaugh confirmation is contributing to her poor performance in the polls. And Kevin Kramer has led Heidi Heitkamp. Kramer is the Republican nominee, in case you don't know, and he has led Heitkamp constantly in recent polls, and the margin is substantial. So I don't think Heitkamp could rebound to what win another term, and North Dakota could eventually flip. And now its neighboring state, Montana, I think is going to flip too, because John Tester is, although Tester is quite popular, he's not leading by a big margin in the polls. He's leading by a tiny margin of around 2 or 3 points. And I think the state is flippable, and Montana voted for President Trump overwhelmingly in 2016, and Trump just went to Montana to campaign for the GOP nominee Matt Rosendale, and it turns out that the GOP base there is absolutely energized to, and I think the Republican, and early voting turnout also shows that the Republican Party has uh, a considerable lead in the state. So I think Rosendale could narrowly edge out John Tester on election day and could eventually become Montana's next senator. And now the Republican Party has 53 seats. Now let's look at the state of Missouri. I think Missouri is the seat here is currently held by Democrat Claire McCaskill, and McCaskill is really unpopular here. Her approval rating is negative, and she's not doing really well in polls. And Republican candidate George Hawley is a huge favorite here, and President Trump and another notable Republican politicians have gone there to campaign for Hawley, and the Republican base there is absolutely interested voting for Hawley, and I think the state would eventually flip, but maybe by a narrow margin. And now let's look at the state of Indiana, which I think is also going for the Republican Party because the polls have tightened recently, and Joe Donnelly is not a huge favorite here, but President Trump and Vice President Mike Pence, whose home state happens to be Indiana, just went there recently to campaign for GOP candidate Mike Braun, and it turns out that the GOP has a big lead over the Democratic Party in early voting, and I think that augurs a GOP victory here, and that's why I'm putting this state in the Republican column. And now Florida, our last state, I think the Democratic Party could retain its seat here. Bill Nelson is doing well in the polls, but yeah, he's leading his Republican opponent, Governor Rick Scott, by a small margin. But President Obama just went to Florida to campaign for Nelson just recently, and the Democratic base is absolutely fired up, and and Bill Nelson is still doing well in polls, but in terms of early voting turnout, the Republican Party has an advantage here. So I think it's hard to predict, but if I am to make a prediction here, I would give Florida to the Democratic Party in the tilt column, and it would be a really close victory for the Democrats. So this is the final map of this Senate race, and this is the last map of 2018 I'll make. So 55 Republicans, 45 Democrats. The Republican Party retains its majority and actually expands its control from 51 seats to 55. So thank you all so much for watching this video, and thank you for subscribing to my channel and not unsubscribing when I was absent. Yeah, I really appreciate that. So I'll see you all later.